fundamental belief that non-renewable resource industry can be a valuable and responsible contributor to society, to the Northwest Territories, and make a significant difference on people's lives through the training and meaningful employment and business side of what this sector does. So it gives me great pleasure, folks, fellow Rotarians, guests, Mr. Tom Hoefer.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the kind introductions, Peter, and thanks very much to Austin for inviting me to come and speak to you today. I'm going to just give you an update on mineral development at the NWT, and I know some of you probably heard the Divik piece in the various media this week, and it's sort of old news to us, but it was good that it was put on the stage again, and I'll try to put some room for optimism, and I'll explain that in this presentation, and then I'll try to give you some room for optimism towards the end of it. So this is what I'm going to go over here. I'll just give you an update on sort of the current situation and the benefits that we receive from the industry-wide support. I'll speak to some of our challenges and opportunities. And then the biggie here is where the world is taking mining. That's the good news story. And why it's our opportunity. So, I know some of you are really new here, like Diana. So with some of this, I wish I had more background, and I'll give you that anytime you like, at another time if you wish. Here's the mining industry. Our Chamber of Mines, of course, covers 2 territories, Northwest Territories and Nunavut, which is a bit of a challenge because the 2 territories are diverging in their legislation and in their approach as well. So we have 3 mines here in the Northwest Territories, and Nunavut has 4. And the interesting thing in the NWT is all of our eggs are in the diamond basket. So all mines are producing diamonds, which is good if diamonds is strong. As I'll show you, we've had a pretty tough run here. And in Nunavut, they have no diamonds in production. It's mostly gold, and they have 1 big iron mine way up there in the high Rotary. This is why mining is important, certainly from my perspective and from a lot of people in government's perspective and communities, and that's the whole socioeconomic benefit. So all of our mines submit socioeconomic reports on an annual basis. They've all made commitments as part of their approval stage, commitments to training and through employment and business development, and they report on that in these reports. And so we gather the data that they put out there every year, and we've just accumulated it here. And so if you look at the first one, employment, 66,000 person years of employment, that's kind of like 2,600 people a year for 25 years. That would be equal to 66,000. So there's trends up and down as mines open and close, but that would be an average, 2,600 jobs a year for 25 years. The breakdown right now is 47% northern, 53% southern, which I don't happen to like. It would be nicer if we captured more of that leakage to the south, and there's various reasons behind that. And just looking at 2020 figures, there was 1,210 northern employees, and about half of those were Indigenous in that year. The business spend has been really high, almost $30 billion. That's to build those mines and operate those mines over the last 25 years. And you can see about 76% of that went to the north. So the mines had all committed to being around 66 to 70% northern spending, and they've certainly done that in spades. And the really powerful thing in here is the Indigenous side. So this is sort of leading edge in Canada when we did this, was setting up the situation for lots of Indigenous businesses to get involved in the mining industry. So we saw a huge growth there from virtually none that could work in the mining industry to probably well over 50 at some point in time, and it's kind of settled down. I don't have the exact number here, but so $7 billion to Indigenous businesses over that time period. And of course, lots of money in taxes and royalties. Those numbers are always hard to get because government kind of keeps them, they're in the general pot, or they haven't all been accumulated in one handy spot to get, but suffice to say it's been billions of dollars. Also to Indigenous governments, because now, for example, the Clecho government collects all the income tax generated in their region, so the more miners they have working paying high income taxes, it helps their income as well. And of course, there's royalties that go to Indigenous groups too in the territories. And lots of money being spent in the communities in various things, whether they're impact benefit agreement payments or their contributions to hockey teams or to the senior center or to women's shelters, all of that. There's been a lot of money that's gone into that. And then we just, I was scratching my head here on wages because one of the things we never committed to was reporting wages in those socioeconomic agreements. So if you're a business, we report the business expenditure, which covers the wages for people working for those businesses. But the actual payment to employees of the diamond companies have not been reported. So just a quick thumb suck, and I figure it could be as high as $3 billion of unreported benefits. So just understand there's lots and lots of benefits out there from these mines. This is the production levels from the mines over the last, since 1999, since division. And you can see in the blue, that's the Northwest Territories, and you saw as diamond mining took off, it climbed up to a really high level of around $2 billion a year in that value of production, and we've been sustaining that for quite a while. You can see in 2020, big fall there in diamond production, and that's sort of the heart of COVID. The diamond market basically got decimated then. The whole pipeline dried up. Jewelry stores weren't selling, so all the polishing places, they also got shut down with COVID. So the whole market really was hit hard, and diamond prices plunged. And of course, production was affected because even our mines, although they kept operating, they were operating under reduced staffing and just dealing with the challenges of COVID as well. So they managed to keep operating by putting into place all kinds of, safety measures and their own labs as well for testing. And anyway, we got hit pretty hard. What's happened now is the diamond prices have gone to record highs. Thank God for that. There's a bit of something coming back. And so we're seeing prices climb as things are becoming more normal. And this only goes to 2021 projection, but you can see we're climbing out here again at this end. But the long-term projection, of course, is maturation of these mines. And that's what you've heard in the news here this past week, because Diavik has got a closure coming up, a hard closure in 2025. Just for interest's sake, if you look at Nunavut had zero production in 2009. So all their mines had closed and they had nothing. 2010 started again, and look what's happened there. They've exceeded even our levels here in just those short sort of 10 years to well over $2 billion in production. So something is working for them there. So some of the challenges we face. Now, if we're going to sustain mining benefits, we need to have healthy exploration, because that's really the research and development. That's the area where you're going to find mines. It's hard to find a mine. 1 in 1,000 projects becomes a mine, so the odds are against you. Most of us are losers in the exploration business, and you have to get used to that. But that means you have to have, like I say, a bingo. You play lots of cards if you want to win. So same thing in exploration. You need to have lots of exploration going on to get a winner. And this is the problem we've been suffering in the NWT. We've basically flatlined since 2007 was the last high, and our exploration investment has been terrible, quite frankly. I mean, Nunavut and the Yukon saw the big spikes here with China pushing their demand and all of that. They reflected that. We didn't. We missed that whole run, and we've still stayed flat and all of that. That's not good to sustain the mining industry. At the same time, if you look here, this chart is the percentage of money we capture of all of the spending in Canada on exploration. And what you see here is a general downward trend on both sides. So that means that the provinces are out competing us. There's a lot of reasons here, and I won't go into all of them. Let me just hit on a couple of them. One would be infrastructure deficit. The other one is complex regulatory processes. And the other one is this whole idea that the provinces are more attractive. And I'm going to touch on that again a little bit later. This is the infrastructure challenge we face. These are two maps that come out of Stats Canada, and it's kind of interesting. Both areas are pretty well blank up there when it comes to things like roads and rail and power. That means the costs are going to be a lot higher up here, as we all know. So we did a study a few years ago with the Mining Association of Canada to say, well, how much more does that deficit cost us? And these are the numbers here. So exploration can be up to 6 times more expensive depending on how far away you are from the infrastructure. Mining capital costs to build a mine can be up to 2.5 times more, and operating costs 30 to 60% higher. So that's a heck of a challenge to have. That means there's deposits up here that aren't being mined, that if you took them and moved them down to Ontario or British Columbia, they'd be mined in an instant because costs are so much cheaper down there. So that's a really big challenge for us. There is a big ask now over the last few years on infrastructure. Lots of people get it, lots of communities get it. And these are the major projects that are being asked for. So extending the Mackenzie Valley Highway, Pleacho All-Season Road, which now has been completed. This big Grays Bay Road in Port. This orange piece here is called the Slave Province. That's an area of geology that's very sort of special in the world. It's the rocks around Yellowknife. They're 2.7 billion years old, and they host things like diamonds, like gold, like base metals. Doesn't matter where you go in the world, they host that. Northern Ontario, same kinds of rocks. Northern Quebec, same kinds of rocks. So you know what its potential is. So this proposal would be to open up that whole region from the Nunavut side of the coast all the way down to the border, and from the NWT side up to the border. So that could then reduce costs in that whole region and help projects in that area become mines. The other ones are on hydropower, and there's a proposal here for Tolston and Snare. You know, we have two grids. Tolston grid, it's a stranded grid. Sits out there by itself. Was built for the Pine Point Mine. You can thank the Pine Point Mine for that. Yellowknife has a stranded grid from Snare. That was built for the Giant gold mine, but it's a stranded grid, and they're both sort of, they're not at capacity, but there's opportunities to increase them. And there's an opportunity to link the two, so you've got more ability to move power around. This one is probably the hottest ticket right now, I would say, because of all of the move to things like electric vehicles. If you converted all of Yellowknife to electric vehicles, where's the power going to come from? I hate to see Jackfish diesels running more and more and more to have electric vehicles, right? Because it sort of goes against the whole point of climate change. So this is probably the hottest ticket item, I would say, and I'll explain a little bit later. Nunavut's got the same kind of an idea, linking Manitoba Hydro up to the Nunavut side and linking the mines and communities. Interestingly, this one's being driven by an Inuit organization. This one's being driven by an Inuit organization too. That's a pretty big first in Canada to see that happen. Canada and the GNWT and other governments are helping these projects right now at the early stage. So sort of pre-feasibility work, environmental baseline work, that kind of thing. What we really need at the end of the day is big bucks to pay for this stuff. Because you could probably throw $1 billion price tag on any one of these. That's the kind of deficit problem we have now. We've left it for so long, like you got a huge ask right now. So what's going to come out of that? I don't know. It would be lobbying government to say, help us out. And it'll be the federal government for the most part. So we have an opportunity here. That's the wording at the top is an opportunity falls into our lap. And I'm saying that because I was around in 1991 when diamonds came along, and that was an opportunity that fell into our lap. We didn't plan for diamonds. In fact, when diamonds were discovered, a lot of people said, yeah, it's just a scam. These guys are trying to make some money. We don't believe it. And lo and behold, who would have suspected that in the space of 5 years from when the first mine went into production, then the diving mine went into production, we jumped to number 3 place in the world for diamond production value. Boom, we were on the map globally. Well, we have an opportunity falling into our lap again. It's called critical minerals. And these are all minerals that are designed to help us with this whole climate change issue. And so, lo and behold, we also have critical minerals up here. This is where they're going to play a really big role, and we're seeing it already. That's with electric vehicles. So you need to have special kinds of minerals for batteries, like lithium, for example. When you have motors in electric vehicles, they have to have really, really powerful magnets in them. Those magnets are made with rare earth elements. When you look at wind and that, again, wind turbines need to have big magnets in them as well. Of course, they need a lot of other exotic materials. Solar cells, the same thing. And then there's this huge battery requirement. So that's what's driving this big change, and it's all to help address climate change. Here's a chart that's meant to show you, here's the kind of mineral resources used in a conventional car. This is an electric car. This is natural gas, power generation, and coal. This is sort of the assortment of minerals you need there. Look at what you need with wind and solar. So what this is saying to you, kind of subtly, is mining is going to have to grow big time. Or recycling is going to have to grow, or both are going to have to grow big time. I've got a couple other short charts just to show you, and these are reports done by an outside agency. Lithium increase. This is all to meet the Paris Agreement targets here to 2040. That's the kind of growth in lithium. Cobalt, nickel, copper, rare earth elements. Huge growth. If you looked at this chart here, look at this. This is what they say. We need 42 times the amount of lithium required than we're using today, producing today. 25 times the graphite, 21 times cobalt, 19 times nickel, 7 times rare earth elements. So if you're a northerner and a government up here, you'd say, where do we fit into all of this? Because if that's the demand, where do we jump on that wagon? Well, certainly we've got rare earth elements. We've got some nickel, but you know, there's room to look for a lot more of this stuff. The other big concern on this is China's position in all of these minerals. And you can see the big red bar, how much position. They have quietly gone out there and scored a lot of this supply, whether it's in Africa, or whether it's even in our own backyard in North America. They have scored supply. And we were kind of asleep at the switch as this is happening. And now what's happening is, of course, the Western world is waking up to this because they've got a real dominance here. So you want to have magnets for electric vehicles, you're not going to get the minerals from them to make the magnets. You're going to buy the magnets from them. And they're going to control the price on that. The other thing that I didn't talk about is defensive uses of a lot of these minerals. There's a whole side to that too. So you can imagine what the US and other countries are thinking about on the defense side. These guys are hogging all of the resources to produce that. So as a result of that, the Western world's taking action. And these are just a number of cover pages from Critical Mineral Strategies, US, Ontario, Quebec, Australia. The Western world's waking up to this, saying, all right, how do we start getting production up and on all of these critical minerals? Canada hasn't got its strategy out yet. It's still in the works. And there are going to be 31 minerals that we've already identified in Canada that fit, and they're all nicely shown on this maple leaf here. And the NWT itself is working on a critical minerals action plan. So they're not going to probably trump what Canada's is, but there is opportunities for the government up here to create the right steps to help enhance this and make sure that they capture a share of this opportunity as well. Canada's recent budget, if you looked at it, $3.8 billion for critical minerals. This I would say is unprecedented. I've never seen a budget that's done this kind of focus this much attention on the mining industry in Canada. So $3.8 billion is great opportunity. Now, how do we fit into that? What's our opportunity? Well, we've got 23 critical minerals that have been identified. This is a map from the Geological Survey, and these are all known deposits of these critical minerals in various parts of the territory. Out of all of those, we've got 4 mining projects that are advancing, and I've got them listed here. Nunavut in rare earth elements. It's also now Canada's first rare earth element mine with its small startup last year. We have the NICO project, we have Pine Point with zinc and lead, and we have Prairie Creek with zinc and some other things as well. These aren't critical minerals, these two, so I've just listed the critical ones here. And we've also got one closed critical mineral mine, that's Cantung. Cantung has opened and closed over the years, mainly because of China. Because China could produce tungsten as a sort of a side product from other processes, so they could do it really cheap. So when they dumped their tungsten out there in the marketplace, the price plunged, that mine closed. And it did that a number of times. So it's still got tungsten there, it's got some copper as well. And I mean, I would hope that in this whole rush to get more critical minerals, that there's an opportunity for that mine to go back into production. So these are the 5 advancing projects, the 4 critical mineral projects in the NWT. I've thrown one bonus project in here. So here you can see where they're located. NICO, cobalt, bismuth, gold, and copper. Prairie Creek, silver, zinc, and lead. Pine Point, the old Pine Point mine site, zinc and lead. And Nunavut, which is just south of Yellowknife here with rare earth elements. And I've thrown in one other project because this is important to us when we're looking at sustaining our benefits in the NWT, and that's the Goose Mine over here in Nunavut. So it's not very far from here. Matter of fact, my daughter works at that mine, and there's an opportunity for probably lots of Yellowknifers to work at that mine. But it isn't going to fall in our lap. I think we need to go out there, and we're starting to work with the city of Yellowknife now on helping get them empowered and helping the minerals industry. So that's an opportunity that's sort of out there that I think that we need to take advantage of as well. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go, I've got a little slide here on each one of those advancing projects, but I'll post this on our website on the front page, so you can go there and you can get the whole presentation if you like. Just a couple of points here. When you're dealing with rare earths like this, or you're dealing with some of the other critical minerals, there are no refineries in Canada that can handle that product. If you sent that product to trail to that refinery and smelter, they would penalize you for a lot of these things that you've got in there. You'd end up with a product that had no value. So these guys are stuck having to build their own facilities. So Vital Metals for this project is building a plant in Saskatchewan that will be in operations this summer to produce these kinds of powders over here from their rock. Same thing with the NICO project. They acquired land in Alberta just earlier this year, I believe it was. And so they're going to be looking at building a refining process plant in Alberta. And one other thing I just wanted to throw at you here too, just to go back to, oops. Okay, I can't go back. Or you can. All right. An interesting thing is this mine, Pine Point, was responsible for Tolston Power being built. Okay. Without this mine, Tolston would not have been built. We also wouldn't have had the railway up into the Northwest Territories. So this mine, the resources were leveraged to get that. Now, when they go into production, there isn't enough power on the Tolston line to provide them with all of their power needs. They're going to have to run fossil fuels and probably LNG rather than diesel for part of their load. NICO project, this previous one, they are just a stone's throw from the Snare hydro line, but there isn't enough power on the Snare hydro line to power them. Now, they're going to have road access, so they won't have to use diesel. They can bring in LNG, so they're going to have to make that up. So there's a little natural sort of conclusion here. If Tolston can be increased in size, which it can, and if it's linked up here to the Snare grid, then these guys can have power. Pine Point can get the power they need. And if they did that smartly and went by the Nunavut project on the way here, then it would also have clean hydropower. And how silly is it if we produce, all of these critical minerals for climate change purposes, and we have to do it on diesel power? Like you go, there's an irony in this, isn't there? So there's work that has to be done here, and I think there's great opportunity for that. This mine, the Prairie Creek mine, though, they're way off on their own. They don't have any hydro around, so they're going to have to go to LNG as their approach. And this is that bonus project that I mentioned, so good opportunity here as well for us to try and attract those benefits. Here's a calendar of our mining industry, and this is what you heard on the news here. So here's Diavik with a hard closure in 2025. And in Acadie, we're hoping that their underwater mining proposal that they're going to be researching and working on in the coming year, that it's going to be effective and that they can increase that mine life. And Gachapway might have a little extra life out there as well with some surrounding deposits. But this is the biggie here, Diavik's closure. These are the 4 projects I mentioned. You can see when they're looking at going into production, and you can see what they're worth. They're about $1.5 billion, all of those. But this is the difference. All those 4 mines aren't equal to one Diavik mine. So this is just a manpower alone if you look at them. You add up all those numbers, they're not as much as what Diavik has employed. So you can expect on the business side as well, the kind of money that Diavik spends on business, these 4 mines probably won't be equal to it as well. So that's the challenge that we're facing. So a little bit of mining 101 I'm going to put in here. Something that people don't realize, I think. Sometimes they think the industry is so all-powerful that it owns everything. Government owns the resources in the ground. Always will. When the mines are mining those resources, the government owns those resources. So the government, or the mining industry is really a contractor. We're there to help government do what governments cannot do themselves. And that's take on big risk. Like if 1 in 1,000 projects is successful in exploration, I don't want my government taking my tax dollars and putting it into exploration, thank you very much. It's pretty high risk. The other thing is government doesn't have the expertise to mine and to convert these resources into public benefits. So that's what industry does. So government owns the resources and they invite industry to come in and help them. That's a partnership. And when it's a partnership, I say government has an obligation to help. If they want success in resource development, they have an obligation to help where they can, or things just aren't going to go as swimmingly as it should. So we're asking, on behalf of industry, we're asking governments for help. Governments, plural, all kinds of them, whether it's Indigenous governments, Crown government in Ottawa, or territorial governments. So this is what we asked actually in our pre-budget submission a couple months ago. Reduce regulatory complexity. Provide project-specific infrastructure support. Canada did this in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. Snare Hydro, Tolston Hydro, the rail. They owned 18% of Nunavut Mine in the 70s. And they supplied the port, they supplied the airport, they supplied the roads, they supplied the community for that. So there's been a history of partnership. But for the last, since 76, that was the last mining town built in Nunavut. Since then, it's been basically dry. So we've seen 40 years of industry being left to do this all on their own with the value of the deposit in the ground. That means those deposits have to be pretty valuable to be able to carry that much extra load. So this is why we ask for that kind of thing. Bring it back again, because we have projects that could use help. Provide help with the supply chain for critical minerals. So that's not just on the exploration and mining side, but it's also on the refining side, because they said they're all going to need to have their own refineries. Provide the regional infrastructure, so that's like Tolston Power, that's like the Slave Province Road, etc. And of course, support Indigenous economic reconciliation throughout. We've done a really good job, I think, to date, but the next big step that we see happening is equity participation, Indigenous equity participation. And I assume government's working on that already with Tolston, and we'll be discussing that more and more with other big infrastructure. And we're probably going to start to see it in mining too, where Indigenous groups will want to buy in. Alberta's actually created a big fund for that, a $1 billion fund, where Indigenous groups can go and get money to backstop. It's their loan backstop to get into resource projects. And then the last thing we asked them for was create a North of 60 mineral exploration tax credit. So I put check marks beside all of these as my bullets, because that $3.8 billion budget that just came through is the first time I've ever seen it actually hits on just about every point there. It's amazing. The one they didn't hit on was this. Now, we have the Minister of Northern Affairs who says, I believe this is a good idea. We have 3 finance ministers from the territories who wrote a letter to Chrystia Freeland and said, we like this idea, but they didn't do it. What they did do was they doubled the mineral exploration tax credit for critical minerals. That's unprecedented too. So it certainly shows that they believe in a tax credit as being a good tool. But the problem with the national tool is it doesn't make the North any different. We can't compete with the provinces who create their own little extra tax credits in there. So we're still going to hound the government on this one. And I think we have allies there to try and get something special for the North to offset us from being different. So that's the big thing that has to happen now is that, and we just sent a letter to Minister Vandal saying, we love that budget. But nowhere in that budget, if you search for the words Northwest Territories or Nunavut, there's virtually nothing specific to that. So they got lots of great words with the concepts to do all of these things. What we need to do now, I think politically, is we got to hammer the government and say, make sure that those good words get aligned to the Nunavut and to Nunavut and to the Yukon. So get our share. Otherwise, the provinces are going to be sitting there taking it, right? So my last slide, I talked a lot about critical minerals, and a lot of my members would kick me in the arse if I didn't talk about them too, because quite frankly, all minerals up here are critical to our economy. We don't want to just turn our back to diamonds and gold and things like that and say, oh no, we're just in here for critical minerals now. We can't be choosy like that. So there are a lot of other projects out there, and I put a whole bunch of logos here, and they'll be hot linked on the deck exactly when I put it on the website, so you can actually go and visit them. So thankfully these guys are here as well. And thankfully Canor and the GWT is also supporting these guys with some exploration assistance dollars to help them work up here in the north. And what I would say is, I would say that if we can get the government to help support on the critical mineral side, I mean, like with the tax credits, with the infrastructure and all those things, there is no way that government can say, well, we're only going to do that for critical minerals. It's going to be the rising tide that's going to also help these projects as well. So that's all I had, and I hope that kind of fills in some time.
All right, so we're well over time. Sorry about that. I'll have Diana please thank our speaker.
It was an absolute pleasure to have you here, Tom. Thank you for giving us a history on where the mines have been, where they are now, where they're going. A couple of key points I picked out is how the mines are a strong contributor to the economic success of the North, from taxes and royalty to community supports. I was really interested in the challenges of road and power. I'm new to the North, so I never really thought about that a lot. But what I liked as well is your presentation was actually very positive, because you came up with all kinds of solutions and ideas of, well, number one, what stood out to me was how much is in it for governments to invest in this, because it's a win-win, actually, because the mines take on all the risks. So thank you very much. Really appreciated having you here today.
Thank you.